Hello everyone and welcome to a new video from Your Overwatch. I'm Eddie the Chump and today we're going to have some fun talking about some things that we all get wrong, or more specifically, things we continue to get wrong in Overwatch Ranked. The game has changed a lot in 2 years, but Ranked has remained a constant source of comedic error almost throughout its entire history. Today's list is made up of misplays or misconceptions that by now we should all know better than to keep repeating. Just to let you know, we're not above it either. I'm guilty of quite a few of these myself on an almost daily basis, so with that said, let's get stuck in. Don't give them a tick! Right, so Overwatch is an objective-based game. What that objective is depends on the game mode, but what never changes is people's obsession with always playing it despite the memes to the contrary. Even when the actual correct course of action is to not do that and focus on something else like regrouping and then actually winning a fight. The most obvious and salient examples of what I'm talking about happen on the first points of hybrid maps and all 2CP objectives. When defending, a lot of players will contest the point at the very first moment an enemy team walks onto it. The very idea that they might gain a bit of progress for free is an anathema to some. This leads to all sorts of errors, leaving high ground too early, giving up your best chance of securing frags, brawling when you might not have the comp to do that, etc. Think about Numbani. Most defenses set up on the high ground to varying degrees, but it's very common to see people drop down onto point immediately because they think contesting the objective is how you win and that you need to do that. But the simple fact is you need to win fights, not just emptily contest an objective that has 3 ticks of progress that decays when the attackers aren't there. Playing the OBJ is supposed to be what you do, right? Well, from a certain point of view, the OBJ in this case is different for attackers and defenders. For attackers, yes, they have to cap the point. For defenders, you have to stop them doing that. They can't if they're dead. Killing the enemy team is almost always way more important than contesting outside of some truly outrageous C9 scenarios. The leaving the high ground too early example, giving up your natural fragging advantage that comes with that, can lose you matches very easily. So next time, try not doing that. Stay up top for a bit to try and frag out before you then go and clear up everything on point. Also, say you lose a fight but just barely, the trades were slightly in their favour, well, trying to deny the attackers 1 tick by perhaps going in when not regrouped and down in numbers will very likely mean you lose all 3 ticks instead. I think this somewhat comes down to panic. You see the progress going up, you hear it, you think everything is so urgent, but really, who cares if they get 1 tick, if by ceding that to them, you get a full regroup and go back in and completely wreck them. Then they have to try all over again, which stalls their progress in terms of clock time way more than you would have done on your own otherwise. I'll put it this way, yes, stopping cart progress at key points will sometimes be needed. Yes, contesting points also has its places. I'm not saying never play the OBJ, but when is killing the enemy team ever not relevant? When is it ever a bad idea to play in a way that wins more fights? Almost never. I'm making space! Right, so most of us will have that one friend who's just a bit too eager to start trouble, who's always getting into scraps when you go out, almost like they're looking for it. Yeah, well that appears to be a lot of main tanks in Ranked. Fighting all the time as a tank is way worse than people think it is. Taping W and mouse 1 down can lose you a lot of matches, and when you even dare say something to them in game, you often hear the defense of, "I'm trying to make space, fam." Now, as much as I've just dogged them out, I have to say I do feel for the tank players because their job is a bit of a tightrope. They do have to make space for their team. They do have to protect them, and it can be a totally thankless task to play that role if your team aren't playing in a way to take advantage of the good things you do. However, you're not actually making space if you die in the act of trying. Space is created when you're an active threat on the map. You have to be alive to do that. The challenge of playing tank and why the pros are so amazing is in finding ways to fight or getting your team somewhere relevant that doesn't get you insta-killed or necessitate the constant pumping of healing resources into you. If you're just fighting constantly, your healers will have to try and keep you up, because if they don't, that's rip for your entire team. This means other teammates who also need their attention won't get it. Mercy isn't actually supposed to spend all her time keeping her main tank alive. She's supposed to be pocketing fragile damage heroes to help them kick some ass. And that's where things can get a little bit uncomfortable as we talk about this. Tanks for sure can playmake. They have the tools to do that, but the most fundamental aspect to their role is in facilitating other heroes like DPS to do their job, which they can't do if their tank is always playing so greedy. I think I understand why this happens too. In matchmaking, playing a hero that depends on others to do their job can be a grind, so perhaps there's a tendency to try and make stuff happen, to try and force your team into playing around you. It is understandable perhaps, but if it repeatedly results in your death, maybe it's better to swap to something else, a hero where you can try and get solo value. After all, some impact is better than none. Grouping is easier. Now I know this is going to set the Jimmy scale to critical Russell factor, but the belief that playing Overwatch in a group is easier as far as ranking up is concerned is just a bit untrue. I think this mostly comes down to the fact that Overwatch is a completely different game in the solo and team context, so much so that in my humble opinion, they're not really comparable. People might say grouping is easier because you're most likely playing with people you know, you're all trying to play properly and run actual tactics, that improved organization makes a team more efficient, so you're more likely to win, etc. Well, the counter to that is running tactics while grouping isn't optional, it's required because your opponents will also be doing so. So if you don't, you're just going to get wrecked. It might have been true that grouping is easier if teams played against solos at their relative ranks, but they very rarely do that. The vast majority of the time, you'll be playing against teams in the same position and the game becomes much more severe. Mistakes are punished more, bad habits from solo queue will get you in trouble, the consequences for any bad team or individual decision are much more drastic. Solo queue is kind of the opposite of that, but still challenging in its own way. Mistakes are everywhere, so it becomes a game of managing that chaos and just making fewer than your opponents do. The best way to do that is go in search of individual value because nothing else is guaranteed. So if you're playing a hero that needs that teamwork, but you're struggling in solo queue, that's because the mode isn't great for actual Overwatch play, and it's maybe advisable to swap onto something else. The same kinds of players that have prospered in previous seasons in matchmaking are still able to do so. If you can play a hero well enough to always get some value somewhere, you'll probably do pretty well. If you're mechanically good enough at a meta DPS, you'll climb for sure. To be diplomatic, I'll say neither is easier per se, the challenges are just vastly different. Solo queue is more individually mechanically dependent, and grouping requires more knowledge and discipline. There, everybody's happy. Or if I know YouTube comment sections, nobody's happy. Thank God I put on my factor 9000 flame screen this morning. Play the meta. Okay, this is a bit of a double-sided coin, as there's a number of ways the meta, or the community's perception of the meta at least, can land people in trouble. The first one is the actual meta of any given patch is incredibly complex, and what ends up getting played often in matchmaking is usually just a tiny fraction of that. Think Rein, Zarya, Hanzo from the last patch. It seemed to be the de facto thing to play everywhere, but that's because it's relatively easy to play, and the counters to it took deeper game sense and organization than just mirroring it. Because of this, people can trap themselves into demanding their teammates play the meta as they see it, even if you don't have the right hero pool amongst yourselves. In ranked, you're not playing at the absolute highest level, so it makes more sense to play into the strengths of the teammates you actually have and what they can actually play. For instance, it doesn't matter how meta Mercy Zen is if your tanks constantly feed because they don't play tank often. You might want to play meta supports because you think it's what's required, but Mercy Zen actually requires disciplined tank play to succeed because you're using damage amp and discord to get the picks that you need while the conservative tanks protect you. That's how it works. If you have a tank who just wants to fight all the time, you know, making space and all that, like I said earlier, then picking a stronger healing support combo would work out much better. This goes for team comps in general, actually. Having bits of knowledge or partial meta comps is worse than approaching the game as a series of individual matchups in solo queue, because in that context, that's what the game actually is. The best you can do is try and help your team as much as possible from your role through the impact that you know you can get. You won't be able to play and at the same time try and teach your team the game. Trust me, I know this era very intimately. The flip side to this is the attitude, we're not pros, so trying to run anything known is a waste of time. Well, not really. I'm not a Premier League footballer. That doesn't mean every time I play five-a-side, I pick up the ball and run with it like I'm a rugby player, because hey man, I'm not a pro. There's still basics of Overwatch that pros can teach you. Admittedly, the previous points about playing in a way that's relevant for the teammates you actually have is a bit more important, but a good idea that the pros have about how to play is still a good idea in terms of overall Overwatch. Believe it or not, most pro tactics aren't, hey Carpe, kill everything. They're more fundamental to the game, the kinds of things we cover in our own videos, and they are useful to learn from. Things like allowing the enemy some objective time to win more team fights, or avoiding brawls when you're playing dive heroes. Exactly what not to do. I'm cheating a bit here. This last section isn't an individual case from our wrong files, but more of a lowlight reel. Firstly, people still think it's always a bad idea to shoot Zarya bubbles. You know what's worse? Allowing a high charge Zarya to live forever and build all the grabs, or let that low health target get away because you're afraid of what the scary Russian lady will do. Each bubble can only give her so much charge in one go, so whether it's her or the thing that she's protecting, if it needs to die for you to win the team fight, shoot the damn bubble. The collective weight of your team's focus fire will kill whatever it is too quickly for the charge gain to matter in a lot of contexts. This next one is a bit of a classic. We need a hit scan for the Pharah. Seriously, it's been like 2 years. Well, unless that hit scan is a Widow, one Soldier or a McCree will not be enough. And actually, having more ground-based squishies for her to target is exactly what she wants. A good Pharah won't play at a range where a Soldier or a McCree McCree will be able to get meaningful damage on her a lot of the time, at least pre-range buff for them. Pharah can be devastating to your team if you're too slow and not avoiding her damage either through positioning or by using abilities like D.Va's defense matrix. One mid-range hit scan will not solve all those problems. The best answers are either move with speed and win the ground fight before her steady damage can get its impact, likely with the aid of a D.Va, win the duel with your own Pharah, or have a dominant Widow player. Don't play slow on the ground and expect one person to just deal with her. It'll end up in tears. Another thing likely to end in Shakespearean tragedy is diving a turret. To feed or not to feed? I hear your Winston ask himself. Don't do it! You've got so much to live for. Fixed points of damage need to be outmaneuvered, and that goes for Bastion on a cart as well. You cannot just jump them and hope you'll be okay. Things like Torb turrets need to be patiently taken out with long range damage, and if there's shielding in the way, you need to break a setup methodically with your own siege damage, not by bundling into it. A Bastion has never been afraid of anything jumping straight into him either, because Mouse 1 solves all of that. What those setups are afraid of is getting crowd controlled from off angles with sleep darts, roadhog hooks, or bursts of damage like Storm Arrow and Junkrat bombs. Do not play their game for them and get rolled as a consequence. I do have more fun examples of wrong, but I think I'll save them for next time. Let me know what you guys thought about this list in the comment section below. I'd be really interested to hear your feedback. I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please don't forget to leave a rating. If you never want to miss another video of ours again, please click the bell icon next to the subscribe button on our channel to join the notification squad. You'll be in great company. And finally, please follow the Your Overwatch Twitter. It's where you can find updates about new videos and other cool stuff. I've been Eddie the Chump, and until next time,